Disquiet Gods! Oh, hey, I'm Joe Mack, and welcome back to the channel. If you couldn't tell, I'm a little excited to talk about this one. We're talking Book 6 of the Sun Eater Saga, Disquiet Gods by Christopher Ruocchio. And of all the books that I've been reviewing from the Sun Eater Saga up to this point, this is not a reread for me. I used a lot of willpower in order to save this book specifically for this time so that I would have a small amount of waiting to do until the final book, which we now know is Shadows Upon Time, comes out, and that is in just a little over 2 weeks. I'm among many of the people who are going to the Shadows Upon Time Gala in Raleigh, North Carolina on the 15th. And so 2 weeks from the day that I'm recording this, November 1st, I'll have Shadows Upon Time in my hand. I can't wait to go Raleigh, North Carolina to the gala, see all the people from the Red Company Discord that I've been doing the Road to Gadadin series with. And next week we will have the Disquiet Gods episode before Shadows Upon Time comes out. We'll be recording that, and I'll put that out sometime next week, so look forward to it. But let's get into Disquiet Gods and how close it is to usurping my favorite book, Howling Dark. As promised, for all of you who may have just finished who may have just finished Ashes of Man, possibly Dregs of Empire, and are about to get into Disquiet Gods, you're here for the rating and those spoiler-free thoughts. Let's jump into it for you guys, okay? We're going 10 out of 10. This is my third 10 out of 10 in the Sun Eater Saga, and it absolutely deserves it. This book is Howling Dark and Demon in White had a baby. The pacing is better than Howling Dark. The lore is as deep as Howling Dark. This is a book of some answers. More questions arise, as tends to happen, but this book is the answers to some of the questions that have come up in the previous 5 volumes. It has maybe not as much action as Demon in White did, but it is plentiful. It really did feel like Howling Dark perfected, almost. And it's tough for me to say that and then also say that this is not my favorite. Howling Dark, I think, is still my number one. I think that as a reader, as a sci-fi fan, that I am more intrigued, or I enjoy the questions more. I want the answers. Don't get me wrong. But there's something about the way that your mind, or my mind at least, engages with this story or stories of this ilk, that I do enjoy the questions. So for that reason, and for one small other reason that does fall into the spoiler section, I'm keeping Howling Dark as my number one. Part of that's going to be nostalgia, and I think that's fine. But this book is right on its heels. I can't think of anything in this book that I would change or that I think could have been done better. I'm sure if you've been on the internet, you've heard about Chapter 40, The Judicator, and boy, oh boy, does that live up to all the hype that you see. This absolutely deserves a 10 out of 10, in my opinion. No notes. No notes, guys. Look forward to it. If you're not there yet, I can't wait for you to get there. And one last book, right? And we're at Gadadin. Spoilers! Oh! Cassandra is a beautiful character. Being able to see Hadrian have further character development after the 800, 600 years that we followed him up to this point, and to see his personality take another step was lovely. Fantastic. The biggest struggle that I had with the dynamic between Hadrian and Cassandra is Cassandra is like 41 years old, but that father-daughter dynamic or parent-to-child dynamic is very strong. She's a 41-year-old woman, and I live in a time where 41 is like full-grown ass adult. In Sun Eater, 41 is a child. So it was a little tough for me to get around condescending might be too harsh of a word, but I'm going to use it. The condescension that Hadrian kind of talks to as a parent talks to a child in certain instances on telling her what to do or what's going on. And that bugged me a little bit. But his love for his daughter, the decisions he makes, the way that he relates his daughter to Valka, the learning that Valka's eyes were green because that's the color of Cassandra's eyes, having her be a dual wielding high matter sword specialist is awesome. Callback to Aloran and all the things that we've learned about high matter swords to have two and how crazy that is. To see his daughter be just as badass in her own right, especially in the beginning, becoming one of the ninth circle for the Myskoloy. And I think that her potential is a little unrealized in this book throughout the rest of it, knowing what she is, knowing what we know about the Jadian Myskoloy and what we should expect from her in combat, I think has room to grow. And hopefully we see some of that in Shadows Upon Time. Another fantastic character introduced in this book is Edward. I want to say Eddard because there's no W, but Edward. And he's fantastic. He's kind of like this mix of younger Hadrian, but different. He's almost like a Hadrian Crispin like mix kind of going on. And the way that Hadrian interacts with this fellow and seeing his daughter interact with this fellow is delightful, to say the least. And watching this character grow on Hadrian, who has no real reason not to like him other than he has come to take him away from Jod. He is sent by the emperor to pardon him and bring him back into the fold, which, it's not really fair, I don't think, necessarily, but it is what it is. But to see the growth of that character's relationship is very fun. And to be in book 6 and to get new characters like this, and there's not one, there's not two, I'm jumping around a little bit just to talk about him, but Raminthanu, baby. Raminthanu feels like the Arbiter from Halo.
What would you have your Arbiter do?
If you know, you know. This is someone who joins up with our main character, fights against his original religion because he sees the heretic as the all-powerful or as the actual correct way, right? Raminthanu witnesses Hadrian battle Ushara on Sabratha and do something to her. He's not really sure whether he killed her or what he did, but it is eye-opening for him to see that Utnash might not be a lie after all. And he joins up and he sticks to his word. He submits to Hadrian, and the fact that he doesn't turn on Hadrian was surprising to me as a reader. It was fantastic. Another new character, absolutely wonderful in how it was handled. I can't say more about how those three characters were brand new, totally unique, and Christopher just nails it with them. And then you have Kalen Herendites. The return of Lorien, insane. Like the having him be on someone else's side, running into Hadrian, especially if you had read Dregs beforehand. And so and I won't spoil that story in case you want to read these in a different order, but the story that takes place in Dregs and getting some of that information about Lorien and seeing where his mind was at leading up to him returning as part of the Lataran army and looking up to Kalen, comparing Kalen to Hadrian, and then is just puts so much, that character who is one of the fan favorites, right? Lorien's an incredible character. To have him become even better is awesome, right? Like it's the side character growth is nuts for Lorien. It's crazy. And then Kalen Herendites The twist there, I missed anything that was pointing towards him being Karn Sagara before it was told to me. Well, not, I mean, leading up to when you were told, like when you're on Latara, it kind of, you kind of start realizing what's going on. But until that point, I had no idea. That was played very well. It was kept, kind of on the outskirts of the things that we were learning about in previous books because his name has been mentioned. And everything there, seeing the dichotomy between both Karns and the duality of how the the event of Karn killing Karn and how, depending on who you were in that moment, affected the way that you progressed from there, was so interesting to see because it's the same character. So if you were the one holding the gun, or however, you were attempting to kill the other, you kind of continued on in the same way, with the way that you've been doing for 15,000 years. But if you were the one that was killed, betrayed by yourself, and if you can't trust yourself, you can't really trust anybody. And the way that kind of breaks down the Karn character, and he becomes someone somewhat different, right? He's not entirely different, but different enough to stand apart from original Karn. And seeing that all come to play within this book, like I can't believe this book is as small as it is with the amount that happens in it. The characters introduced, the characterizations that change or grow, and everything else going on. And I haven't even talked about the overarching lore information that we learn. Or I feel like if I've really sat down and made it's hard to make maybe an appropriately sized video to talk about this book. There's so much going on. And speaking of Sabratha, I mean, this is like Annika, not on steroids, but like the other side of that coin. Annika was our big moment with the Quiet leading up to this point. A lot more lore, our powers got stronger. The vision was a little more clear, leading, back into Demon in White. Hadrian becomes Himdrian, and then everything that occurs after that. And now we get to Sabratha, and this is the Watcher half. This is Watcher information drops. We meet Ushara. We see the strength and power of these beings, the eldritch cosmic horror that they become, the larger than life, eyes in the sky. Everything going on here is just chef's kiss. It's so hard to really put a lot of this into words, but for me, the build-up throughout the Sabratha arc to learning about the Perseus weapon, investigating just as we have on the other Quiet sites, Watcher sites, Viartu sites, whatever you want to call them, the way that it's built up here, leading up to the Cielsen arriving, having a new painted man, which is like a species now. It's not just like one guy. The expansion of the universe just in that moment with that one character, seeing Gaiska, the elect master of the lodge that we had seen in Ashes of Man on Ganelon, and just everything that comes together in this moment. Ushara coming to not life, because they don't like die, they're pure energy, but like getting strong enough to start acting their will more freely and on a larger scale. All these people rising into the air, being torn apart, the eyes in the sky, everything going on, giving Hadrian that vision and putting herself as the emperor. What does he call it? The empress consort, like his side piece in a future where he could rule, and leading up to the weapon being broken and them finding a way around it, and then using the way that the Watchers are described as pure energy and hijacking Gaiska, trying to broadcast his thought form off planet as a way for Ushara to escape through the magnetosphere is nuts. Like that, like not only I get to read the book, right? I get the words on page after it's written. I get to dissect it as I'm going through it. But there are certain things that, even though it's very clear that Christopher has planned very well a lot of this book, but for him to think of these things when he's writing them, like how vital is Ushara for the second book? We see at the end of this that she has joined Dorayika and Mutinar on Darantun, and that brings, one watcher to two watchers, but Christopher could have had any other number of watchers show up. But to use this one and make this one like have a lasting effect on Hadrian, and also be a mission failure, and I don't know, just the way that he was able to think of this thing that doesn't exist for the Minos personnel to stay alive and for the Watcher to hijack it is just like, it's so cool to me. Christopher does it again. Hadrian dies. That's insane. And he's writing the story. It's the same stuff I said back in Howling Dark. Christopher's able to kill this character who's writing the story. We know he's there at the end. We know he's still alive. And I'm still shocked. I'm still surprised. It doesn't feel cheap, even though I know he can't be dead for real. But you feel the emotions that Hadrian feels. You feel the emotions that the witnesses, Selene, Nema, Cassandra, on what they're going to see when Hadrian's finished melting. It's so masterfully done as someone who's never written anything to think about how you write something that goes against fact and for it not to feel lame or cheap. And I can't say enough positive things about the fact that he was able to do it once in Howling Dark, and he's able to do it again. Another one. It's crazy. I'm not going to try and summarize or paint with any pretty words what happens in chapter 40. It is everything that it should be. It is everything that it needs to be. It fulfills all the hype that you've ever heard or seen or read on the internet about it. It is perfect in every way.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
And the way that it gives us answers, literally the way that it gives us answers, not just that it does, is so beautiful and so fantastical and so Sun Eater. I can't say, and like, it is the most Sun Eater chapter of all the Sun Eater chapters. I think it's more than any of the badass moments, the power use, or the extra Solarians, the Cielson, more than any of that. This chapter is no words. I may have mentioned it before that Karn Sagara is my favorite character besides Hadrian in these stories, my favorite villain across a lot of media and a lot of different stories. And they're back, baby. We got Kaelin Herenity's Karn, we got Suzuha Karn. It takes a long time to meet Suzuha, but we do return to Vorgosos. And this is my favorite section of the book. Chapter 40 is incredible. I love it. And it's very important. But Vorgosos floats my boat, man. Everything that happens here is so wicked, so cool. And the way that it mirrors, like, through a filter, everything that happens the first time that Hadrian's here is so artistic and so meticulously executed. It's wonderful. The biggest sin in this book, and the one problem that I have, is that Calvert just dies off screen. He's been alive for it was 3,000 or 5,000 years in Howling Dark. So at this point he'd be like 4,000 or 6,000. And there's no details given. He's just not there. And as my favorite lackey of another character, Calvert was so cool. And he could have absolutely shined in this book, I think, especially because they returned to the Tree of Life. That was, I'm devastated that he wasn't in this book. But that is a particularity to deal with for myself. I don't think it's really going to affect many other people. And the fact that Christopher did at least address his absence is important to note. He didn't just have it be totally ignored. It is addressed, and I can appreciate that at least. But Vorgosos in the Karn Sagara arc, the action, everything that's the lore, the Karn is the first one to meet the Cielsen. He gave them their communications, like all these things that are coming full circle that we've learned in the first handful of books is incredible to see unfold. It's mind-blowing, and it's nonstop in this book. This whole book just blows your mind. It's I keep using this, like, I just can't, but Vorgosos does not stop with Karn. We go back to Brethren. And this Americani demon, if it was terrifying the first time we met it, somehow it's able to take it up another level. We're talking bringing it up to 11, right?
You know what we did?
Put it up to 11.
Exactly. One louder.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
Now we got faces popping out talking to us. It's not just the hands and the eyeballs. To end up killing Brethren and to have Brethren birth some sort of From Software monster. 2 heads, 3 arms, different fingers, a 3rd leg just for fun. Like, it's got this, it's described as this child's leg that comes out of the right hip, and it's just like hanging out. Black hair, white hair, a little bit maybe yin and yang thing going on there. Might be representative of the different personalities that might be contained within Orphan. But the creatures that Christopher created, the Cielsen, the Watchers, Brethren, and now Orphan, continue to be blown away. And we are talking the last 2 chapters now. Just another, I said there were answers. These are the questions. Orphan shows up. He's not so much a question, so much as like, how did Brethren birth something? Were all the Americani able to have done this? Was this a result of all the feeding and the reservoir that Brethren lived in? Is it the amount of time? Is it because of the foresight and to where it had grown? I mean, it grew its own human. It confirms in the last chapter that scans were done on Orphan, and it is entirely human with no trace of machine. So it's a human, a grotesque, insane-looking human, birthed by a machine that is a small, deformed boy in a box merged with an AI. Come on! Seeing the Sun Eater books progress the way that they have, knowing that we started an Empire of Silence, and that the penultimate book, Disquiet Gods, gets to where it gets to, is just an insane journey. And I hope you are just as excited as I am to read Shadows Upon Time. In 2 weeks, we'll have it in our hands. Comes out November 18th, 2025. If you want it signed, check it out at Quail Ridge Books. If you want to engage in further discussions about Sun Eater, check out the Red Company Discord. I'll put a link for that down below as well. Check out the Night Captains podcast, started by the owner of the Red Company Discord, Orion, and one of the best people on there, Doom. They're having fun. Episode 1 just came out a little bit ago. Episode 2 will be coming out soon. Check that out if you just can't get enough Sun Eater content. Let me know what you thought about Disquiet Gods. Let me know what you think is going to happen in Shadows Upon Time and how much you have loved the journey that we've been on. We are almost to the end of the road to Gadadin. It's bittersweet, but everything must come to an end. So do me a favor and get in those comments. Love you. Bye. I want the answers. I want the answers. All right. So do me a favor and get in those comments. Love you. Bye.